Hello there. Welcome into my studio. Happy to be back. I know I've taken a few weeks off, but we're excited to be making some jars. These are hopefully going to be in an upcoming wood firing at Piedmont University. So we're very excited about that, trying to knock out a few more pieces. We have some white clay that we're working with today. Yeah, all right, so lidded jars. We're going to be working with 3 pounds. That's usually a reasonable amount of clay, and the flange for them will be on the jar itself, not on the lid. So these will kind of be inset. That's just the style of jar that I've been enjoying making right now. Sometimes you can just make a straight cylinder and make the lid to sit on top, but that's not what we're doing today. Just a few simple tools, and we'll hopefully make one lid, and we won't be able to finish it, but you'll get an idea of what we're shooting for. Just a few tools: regular throwing sponge, makeup sponge for cleaning up tight little areas. We will need a ruler, and let's see, sponge on a stick, a simple rib, and a wooden knife. And Joyce, can you get me a calipers, please? I forgot about that. The calipers will be helping to measure the lid diameter. It's a little bit easier with the calipers. So we got that. Thank you, Joyce. All right. So like I said, we're working with 3 pounds of clay. The amount of clay for the lid will, vary depending on the diameter. So I think I measured up 1 1/4 pounds, and we'll see how that works. We'll get started here. I always have these ideas for certain shapes on jars, and I feel like I have a lot left to explore in them. There's so many interactions with the lid that I really enjoy. There's lots of lines going around, and there's a lot of things to play around with that. And I would like to start trying to make some square jars. I'm not sure about how to get the bottom squared the way that I want, so we have to work through that. This clay is a wood fire B mix. I bought this to fire in the wood kiln. I've never used it before, but it's supposed to be pretty. So we have some of our regular stoneware going in there. That gets to be a little bit more brown, some oranges. Hopefully this will get some blues in there. It'll be a long firing. I think it fires for about 4 or 5 days. So you get a lot of ash buildup. I haven't done one in a few years. I'm very excited to be invited back to do it. Now, I take care to get these pretty well centered. We want our lids to fit very well. You can make wonky pots with the lids and whatnot, but that's just not what we're shooting for today. This being a B mix clay, it's relatively smooth, similar to porcelain. We're going to take our time a little bit more when we move it around. With my regular stoneware, it has a little bit more varied particle sizes, and I feel like I can boss it around a little bit more without it getting too out of center. With smooth clay, similar to porcelain, especially with porcelain, I like to take my time with all my moves, just to keep it running true. And also, with smoother clay bodies, I take more time compressing the bottom. Without that varied particle size, you're much more apt to get cracks in there. Now there is a balance with the jars that I have not figured out yet, and that's the proportions of the height that I like with the width of the opening. I like the way that narrow openings look, but they don't function all that well. If you can't get your hand in there to get to the bottom, they're not that much use for an everyday thing. And also it makes them kind of a bugger to clean. So I've been pushing myself to make them a little bit wider. The lip, when I'm throwing these, isn't anything too large. I'm going to be rolling this in. You can keep a thick rim and split it. That's another option. I prefer to roll it in. So we're just, maybe 14 or 15 centimeters for the opening is, I think, my goal. We'll see what happens. I don't mind if these have a little bit of extra weight. They have to stay in the kiln at a very hot temperature for 4 or 5 days. And I like the idea of having a little bit of extra clay there to kind of stand up to that type of abuse. So we're not shooting for a delicate jar. I want it to be robust. And strong looking. These will be straight up and down. Put a few moves in there with the rib, but you know, for the most part, it's just a straight up and down cylinder. All right, one more pull here. That'll be all done. Just a little extra clay on the bottom. I don't want to get the bottom too narrow. I want to keep it a little bit wider. I like the idea of it kind of being like a tree trunk, starting with a nice solid base. You could keep dog treats in here. Maybe some rice, dried beans. Where we're sitting right now, we are way off. From the outside of the rim, it's like 13 centimeters. This one's getting pretty narrow. I don't like to get this too wide before I roll the rim. Prefer to have to make it a little bit wider after I've done that. And I'll also put a little bit more movement in the pot after I get the flange set up. Okay, so this is the tricky part. And to practice this, I recommend throwing a rather thick-walled cylinder, and you can make little sections on here that you can keep cutting off and go down. You'll throw up little sections and you can practice rolling this. And I recommend doing that a few times to get the hang of it, because you don't want to get to the point where you feel like you've thrown a nice piece and then you have no idea on how to execute the top. So take some time and practice that. So the idea here is we don't want to get the wheel moving too slow. It has to be going at a good speed. We'll get the, say, bottom 2 inch or the top 2 inches here nice and wet. We don't want it to be gripping at all. And we're going to roll this in and create our little ledge for the lid to sit on. We have to support on the underside here while pushing down. We're shooting for a few different things here. We want it to come out, but not too far. We're going to measure our lids right so that they sit properly. So you don't need a ledge that sits in too far, otherwise you've created a more narrow space. And then also we don't want it to be too deep. On these, I want the depth to match what's going to be the rim of my lid, so that I'm going to be shooting for a line that comes across and up and over my lid. I don't want too much of a discrepancy between the height of the walls and where the lid starts. I don't want the lid to be set way down. And you can do fun things like that and really accentuate it, but that's not the goal. I'll put my whole hand over here, and I'm really supporting with my pointer finger, but I have these other fingers here too. Got my thumb on the outside, and if it starts to get dry, get some more water on it, and we're just gonna push this in. And while I'm supporting it, make sure that you're not pushing back out with your finger. You don't want this to bulge out too far, which is very easy to do. Take your time, just pushing in. You can see it's already starting to bulge out a little bit. It wants to do that. And after I get it pretty well flat, I'm going to use my thumb here to push this area down and kind of over. There's so much going on here. And I'm also supporting it underneath with my finger still. So what we're trying to do is offer a lot of support on all the areas that we're manipulating here, which is quite a few. Aesthetically, what I'm looking for on this one is a wide outer rim here. This is kind of where I'm going to be putting a lot of the fun parts of this jar, we'll say. I'm trying to create a little more interest towards the top of the piece. Now don't let this part fall down, so keep it supported. I don't use a rib or anything right here to create a hard line. When I throw my lid, it's not going to be a sharp corner, so I don't want a sharp corner here. This edge should match what the rim of the lid is doing. And that's pretty much it. If we measure right, our lid should sit right about here. And we are going to do a good job measuring. So then we don't need this area to stick out to here because we know our lid is going to fit properly. Now this depth here was what I was talking about. I don't want it too deep. I want it to match approximately what the rim is going to be. When I'm making these, I think about where pieces are coming into contact with each other, physically and visually. I want the lines to move along, to move your eyes along the piece, but also physically in the sense that we're going to be putting this lid onto here. I don't want hard corners that are going to chip, and I don't want fragile pieces. You don't want to get your jar home and you're looking to use it once or twice and then it chips, and that's disappointing. Alright, so we're just cleaning these edges up. We'll measure, we'll see where we're at. And like I said, when I'm measuring right there. That's where I want the edge of my lid to sit. So that's what I'm going to measure. And I want to do this as precisely as possible. So right now it's 12.25 centimeters. Let's try to push this out to 13. So while supporting everything, supporting the bottom here, finger over here, and just pushing this out, just like you would with any other pot that you're making, whether it's a mug or what have you. So we stretch it out. We're going to come back and measure again, and we hit 13. So that's good. I'm going to make a series of these, 3 or 4 of them. I will make all the lids and the openings at the same size. So basically all my lids are interchangeable, and I'll make one extra lid in case one breaks, and if one breaks on any of them, the extra lid will fit that. Okay. On this part, want this to curve like that. That's what I'm playing around with today. I'm hoping that this angle relates to the angle that I'm making my lid, and it ties it all together. Now I'll round these out a little bit. We don't want them to be too sharp. So we have all that set up. Now it's time to play with the actual body of the jar here. I do like this coming out a little bit, but it's a little bit too much for me right now. So I'm going to come under with my fingers right here and try to push this section out. So on this pot, I do want it to say that this is the top part. I do want something to say this is the bottom. Something I tend to do with many of my pots. Hand on the inside, metal rib on the outside, just moving up. You can move down. I like the rhythm that this creates, and it reminds me of the landscape around here. I don't know if we executed this part the exact way that we wanted, but that's why we're working in a series. So on the next one, we'll do something a little bit different. We can compare the two, and we'll see where it leads. I like working in multiples. You have time to work through ideas. It's all well and good to put it on paper, but then it's another thing to be able to put it into clay. I have no idea where this rib came from. I never used it for years and years, but I'm really enjoying it. It's nice and rusted. It feels good in my hands. I like how thick it is. I like the thickness and the sturdiness. I can get my hand on it to really put the marks that I want. So I kind of rolled up the bottom here. I'm not looking for this to be perfect. I do want a line down here with these pieces. After I'm able to get this off of the wheel, I'm going to come in and push up from the bottom to make little undulations around it. And if you have this line here, it really follows those and creates a nice rhythm. Now we messed around with everything. We're going to come back and measure again. Needs to come out just a hair. If I do make my lid the wrong size, ideally I've made it just a touch too big, and I can trim it to come in and fit properly. If I've made it too small, there's not much left to do. Alright, so that's 13. That looks good. One thing to think about is, do we like the juxtaposition of, so this line's a little bit more wobbly. The form has some waves going on, but the rim is rather tight in its movement and the lines. Do we like the differences there? Are they working with each other. I don't know. I suppose we'll find out after it's all fired. Alright, set this to the side here. So now we're going to work on a lid. And we're going to work on that one that I haven't figured out yet. All the little intricacies of it. It's a lid style inspired by Byron Temple. We'll work through it here. I don't know if anybody else enjoys it as much as I do. But I sure do. We're going to really crank down on this, make sure it's tight. We're measuring our calipers out to exactly 13 centimeters. Alright, we got that. Set that aside nicely. Most likely we have too much clay, but that's okay. This lid will get a pulled handle put on it after the bottom is trimmed. So I start with a little bit more of a doorknob shape at the very beginning. So I'm basically trying to throw this on a pedestal. I need it to sit up high a little bit for the shape that I'm trying to put into it. One thing I struggle with is coming up with the exact weight that I need for a lid for the size of the opening on a pot. I suppose I should start writing some of these things down and I won't have to guess so much. So I start by throwing a bowl form. And the rim on here is going to have a similar edge as the jar. If I need more clay to make this wider, I can always just push down and grab a little bit more clay. So it's kind of like throwing these off the hump. Maybe I should throw these off the hump. It's basically what I'm doing. Whenever I throw something off a large hump, everything cracks on me. That's why we're not doing it. Alright, so we're getting pretty close here. Now I'm going to lay this down. So the lid is going to sit on the pot in this direction. It's not thrown upside down. But we do have to trim off a large amount of clay. I want a little bit of volume in the sense that this is going to be coming up. Let's see where we're at here. We're getting very, very close. The farther down I push this, the more narrow or smaller diameter it should become. So we have this little hole right in here. And so what my plan is I put a strap handle, or like a pulled handle, something you put on a mug, we're going to call that a strap handle, and it'll sit over here, but it doesn't have to come up too high because hopefully there'll be a little bit of room right in this middle to get your fingers around it. And it's just an interesting lid to make. this clay gets overworked, it's going to start drooping down more and more, and it's hard to get it to stand up in the right direction. So those are some things that I'm still working through. And then also, we created this pivot point on the underside right here, and I'm trying to figure out how to get some more compression there so we don't get little cracks. I've been getting little hairline cracks around there. So this time I'm just gonna support my pinky under there and try to compress that area a little bit. When I add my handle to this, I'm going to, for the most part, try to continue with the angle of this. So the handle will come up and it won't be too high. It'll create the rest of the dome shape. Alright, we're not quite there yet, just the way that we want it to be working. I'm going to slow the wheel down. And some of these edges and things aren't perfect, that's okay. We're going to be trimming this pot. We can come back and adjust. One thing I'm not sure about is what to do with this edge right here. Should it be nice and tight, like the rim on the jar, or should it be a little bit more loose, like the bottom of the jar? Do we want to try to tie those pieces back together? Those ideas? These are all fun things to work through. Maybe do one of each, see what's more successful. Don't forget that this lid is very important. It deserves all the attention that you gave to the jar itself. It's like another little pot. We're just about there. We're going to lift this up just a touch. Should fit well. There we go. One nice thing about having to lift that edge up just to make it a little bit wider, the good part about that is our lid isn't going to be just coming down like this, which looks a little frumpy. If it kind of comes up like that, if you kind of think of I don't know specifically what it is. I'm thinking of like Japanese roof lines and things. You know, they slant up and there's a lot of energy there. We want there to be energy in this. And that's about it. Now there's got to be a better way to do this. As far as taking this off, this is one thing that I'm figuring out. I'm just going to leave it on the bat. You could definitely pick this up off of here. That's no problem. But, you know, do we try to cut it off like we would cut something off the hump so that we don't have to wait for all this clay on the bottom to dry? Makes timing a little bit easier. Just check one last time. There we go. So that's it. There's our lid. It'll take a little bit of trimming. These will get finished up tomorrow. And that's when we'll put our handle on. I'll post a picture of the actual finished pot once we get it made. And then hopefully the wood firing goes well and we'll have some things all the way done. Thanks for joining. I hope you learned something.